Hello, and welcome to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast, where we empower you with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom. I'm Josh Metal, and I'm here today with real estate investor, entrepreneur, author, and speaker Eric Martel. Eric purchased his first apartment building at age 18. He beat me by 3 years, which is very impressive. While Eric was still in college, and he was able to retire from his day job at a very young age as a result of the cash flow from his rental properties, which I love. Eric believes financial freedom should be everyone's number one goal, and the fastest way to achieve that financial freedom is through the generation of passive income from rental properties. So Eric, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the show, my friend. How are you doing today?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Josh.
Yeah, truly my pleasure. And I think we have a lot in common, but the one that I really want to dive into first that I'm fascinated with is how in the heck did you buy an apartment building at 18? And like I said, I'm a little miffed. You beat me by 3 years. So let's start there.
Yeah, I knew from very early age, I would say 9 years old, that it didn't want the life that my parents had. My parents were, 9 to 5 kind of workers and living paycheck to paycheck. And we were not poor, we were not rich. We're kind of like middle of the road. If we wanted something, we had to. My parents had to save for it for a while in order to be able to buy these kinds of things. And and I knew that's not the life I wanted. I didn't necessarily want to be like, massively rich, but I wanted to be able to do things that I wanted when I wanted them and not having to worry about money. And I knew that the 9 to 5 was not the way to go. And I had already seen some hints from other people in my town that, they seem to be doing much better. They seem to have not only they have more money or more freedom, but they also had more freedom with their time. And I thought, we're missing something. and I didn't know how to get there, what to do, and stuff like that. And education system was certainly not the place to learn how to do that, because they're putting you into a conveyor belt towards employment. And when I went to university, I basically was introduced to a real estate investor, and he was just a regular teacher, community college teacher. I don't even know what he was teaching, but he was not teaching real estate or financial freedom, I tell you that. And but he managed to build like a 36-unit apartment building with his small salary as a community college teacher. And that I thought it was so inspiring. And I said, okay, well, I want to learn everything this guy has to say. And so I talked to him, and he agreed to be my mentor. And then I said, well, I want to do it. Let's do it. There's no better way to learn than to do it. And then I started looking for an apartment building, small apartment building. I had no money. And so that was the next challenge. And so I found a realtor to help me find the right property. And really what the realtor kept telling me is, this doesn't exist, this does not exist. And then he would come up with properties that show him in his mind that, see, I told you what you're looking for doesn't exist. Look, I found something else that doesn't work. And so I think at one point he gave me like 4 binders of MLS. These are those days when you don't have it was not
I remember.
online. Yeah. So, and it's I think it was just to shut me up and say, you go, you look, you find it yourself then. And so during the weekend, I basically went through all of that, and I found 3 properties that were potential, that would cash flow if they were 100% financed. And of course, I needed to have, the vendor take back or set some kind of seller financing situation. And only one out of the 3, I think only one of them was interested in doing a seller financing on the 20% of the property, which would have been my down payment. Mm-hmm. And so there we go. So that's kind of like set me on to to buy this property, no money down. I think I put $125 for the application fee for the credit union to give me the first mortgage. And I think I had like $200 in the bank, and I was like, oh, this better work. Because otherwise I just paid 125 and nothing. But yeah, so that's, and so yeah, completely 100% finance and cash flowing. I think it was cash flowing about $250 a month. Not much, but it was a start. And that was really, I didn't have any grand plan of achieving financial freedom at that point. I was only 18 years old. That was just a test to me that this was achievable. I was able to make money without having to work, without having to work and stuff like that. Obviously, this model is very hard to replicate. Like I had to look at 400 or 1,000 properties in order to find one that would work, and it took a very long time. And so having money is a lot better if you want to build a passive income portfolio. But it is possible, and I think it is even possible today, and probably even more easily done today than when I did it.
Well, I want to just pull out a few of the golden nuggets in there. And one of the things that you said was, going through school, going through the university, there's no education on this. Like, nobody's going to sit you down and say, follow this path and you're going to become wealthy and financially free. So it doesn't land in anybody's lap. We have to go out and search for it. We have to find it. We have to look under the rocks. We have to say, who's successful around us? And we have to say, what books are they reading? And we have to be involved, and we have to put attention on it. It doesn't happen accidentally in most situations. We have to be intentional. So that's number one. The second thing was that you found a mentor, you found somebody that had a model for success, and you said, oh, it's the old, if a man can conceive and believe, he can achieve. And, and that came from Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, of course. But when we see somebody that has success, we then go, we then start to believe, well, they're not really any smarter than me. Why not me? How come I can't do that? So that's another golden nugget.
Especially when you're 18 years old, that nobody is smarter than you are.
Right, exactly. We're too stupid to know better. That's exactly right. That is so true. And then you took a risk. One of the things you said was, there's no better way to learn than to get into the game. And I find that one of the big inhibitors for wealth and learning about wealth is the fear of the fear of putting your toe into the pool and testing the water. And that's the only way you're going to learn how to swim. I mean, you can read as many books as you want, but I'm telling you, the trickle of investment that starts will teach you more than anything that you're going to read, because you're going to learn those real life experiences, and you get to start small. So when you made a mistake on that first deal, you had $125 in capital at risk.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure the last building you bought, you had more than $125 in capital at risk. So it's those early deals that we cut our teeth on, that sharpen and teach us. And if we lose small. If we wait until we're, really late into the game and we put all our chips in the table and now we're learning, there's some big danger to that. So I love that. There were a lot of lessons and a lot of nuggets, and I just wanted to flush those out, Eric.
Yeah. And I think the fear comes from two different things. There's obviously a mindset kind of situation where, you're part of a herd and the herd wants to keep you in, and they keep telling you about, the big bad wolf out there and stuff like that. And, but you have to kind of like look at that and say, okay, well, these are limiting belief, or these are kind of things that are preventing me from taking action. There's a way to, yes, there are some bad situations out there, but how do I mitigate that? How do I approach it differently to be able to take action, do something, and still not lose everything on it. The other thing too is that even if you think more logically and you think about risk, you kind of had all these risks floating out there, and this is, oh well, I can lose everything, or what if I'm going to lose the first house was I was going to lose my down payment. the first house I bought, I thought, oh, I'm going to lose my $500 down payment. I was just like, okay, well, that's $500. It's no big deal. I paid more than that and, go to university and stuff like that. So, but that's the kind of thing. It's kind of like, look at these risks logically instead of having them floating around, make a list and say, okay, well, if I lose that, I lose $500. If this happens, then that. If this, I have insurance. If this, and then it's to take a step forward. And real estate is actually pretty good at protecting you. I mean, you can write things in the contract. You can put contingencies in the contract to allowing you to back out and get all your money out. So that's, you can go in there, do your due diligence, visit the property, run your numbers, all of that. And if you feel like you're, for the first few properties, you feel uncomfortable, just back out. And then, maybe the next one is going to be the right one where you're going to know I can't pass on this one.
Yeah. The other thing that you said was that you had that whole book, that whole binder of MLS sheets that you went through. And, when my mother and I started buying our residential real estate properties, we would figure we would have to make 100 offers to get one accepted. Mm-hmm. Because we wouldn't necessarily care about what the price of the listing price was. We would figure out what's the house going to be worth after we fix it up. How much is it going to cost to fix it up? How much can we pay for it? So it's a numbers game in that regard. You just got to keep moving. So talk to us a little bit, Eric, if you would, about your journey from that point forward, from college forward.
Well, so I graduated as in actuarial science, which is the math of financial risk. And so I got a job as a consulting actuary and worked there for a while. And then, but I didn't really like it. I was working in pension at the time, and I was basically converting defined benefit pension plan, which is like corporate pension plan, into 401ks, which is basically a tax deferred savings account, as you know. And to me, that's shifting the risk of, from the employers to the employees. And it's just, and people, they didn't care about that then. And, but now they're starting to care now that they're trying to retire, And so I didn't like the environment. I didn't like what I was doing. And technology was really picking up. And I decided to go and do independent and put my math skills at work in high tech. And I did that for a while as an independent consultant, and also did some full-time job. I had a very fluid view of a job. So I was often going from an independent consultant to full-time employees and then back and forth. I did that a few times in my life. If I couldn't get in as an independent consultant, because I would get a job at a company for to learn something and to get me somewhere. I didn't just go there to work, right? So that's, so if I could, sometimes they would say, well, we can do that. You're going to need a lot of training, but we don't do that for independent consultant. So you have to come on full time, and then we'll train you. We'll do all of that. And I said, okay, well, did that. And then I learned everything. And then I got out independent consultant. So I did that kind of back and forth a few times.
Well, then you've had an insider view on retirement plans. I mean, you were there helping people navigate that transfer. And so I wonder, what's your view on, retirement plans today, and how do you feel about the people that are going down the path with 401ks, and what do you see the future of retirement? Do you think we stick with the 401k plan, or how do you think that evolves?
Well, I think you would be better off not putting anything in the 401k plan and investing in rental real estate. I think you have a significant amount of tax benefit in rental real estates that would significantly offset any tax deferred gain that you would get with 401k. So that's kind of my point of view. The other thing too is that with a 401k, you have you have a lot of rules associated with it. When the money is in there, you can't do anything else with that. I mean, you have to invest it in the stock market or whatever. You can do some self-directed retirement account, self-directed kind of
IRAs,
IRAs and stuff like that. So, and you can invest in real estate with that. So that would be a little bit better. But in general, I think the 401ks, you would be much better off to invest in rental real estate, and then you have money. You're free to reinvest and adjust your investment. And it's also, real estate is also tax deferred. You can also do 1031 exchange. You can defer that forever. Even 401ks, you can defer that forever. You also, you can't even get cash flow out of your 401k without paying some kind of tax, without paying some penalties if you want to do that early. So that's what I think. I think you have way more flexibilities in rental real estate. You have more opportunities, and it's a great tax advantage for the future.
I think you kind of alluded to this already, but the other question that I wanted to ask you was, what do you see as the primary challenges to attaining financial freedom? And I think you alluded to it in terms of, the tax advantages, but what do you see as the other things that are holding people back from achieving financial freedom?
Yeah, so I think I think the part of the problem is that people don't take action. So they don't see it as a priority, first of all. And then they just, they think that, somehow society is going to take care of them, or they have a deterministic approach to things and think that, oh yeah, this is meant to be or not meant to be. And I'm not really in control of my life or my destiny. And no, you are. You make things happen, and this is how it works, and that's very important. And taking action is the number one thing. And then if they decide to take action, then often they are misguided, or they're all over the place. They try multiple strategies, and they fail at them, and then they say, well, this is not for me. And they kind of move away. They don't really learn their lesson. I think the key, I think we talked about mindset before, and a lot of people are talking about mindset, so I'm not even going to talk about that. But I think another important thing is having an alignment between your goal and your strategy. I think this is very important. And this is what's missing. If your goal is passive income, so many people are investing in flips and spending their weekend with a hammer in their hand to make some money. No, think about what you want. You want to have passive income, then this is what you should be looking for. You should be focusing on investment strategy that's going to get you passive income. And then kind of what's supporting all this is, what are your resources to implement this strategy? So time is obviously an important one. Money and kind of like skills is also another one. If you're working full time, spending the rest of your time, like the nights and weekends, with a hammer in your hand, is not going to help you. It's going to be very difficult, very lengthy process. If you don't have money, then you have to find like some other ways to another market, another ways to invest, find investors to invest with you or something like that. But yeah, so that's what's missing, is to kind of find this alignment and then and stick with it.
Well, and I think something that you said really struck a chord with me, which was come to the realization and the kind of honest moment with yourself that the government isn't going to take care of you. We hope that there's that your 401k, if that's what your vehicle is that you have chosen, we hope that does okay for you after all the fees and everything else. But at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're taken care of later in those years. And I think oftentimes people don't have that moment of reality. I know when I was young, there was a particular moment that I can remember to this day where I said, okay, if I'm going to figure this out, it's on me, because, dad's not around teaching the lesson. Mom doesn't seem to have all of those skills yet. And so I'm going to have to figure this out. This is on my back. And I think that's a very important inflection point for everybody to hit if they're going to, as you say, create their goals and a strategy to get there. They have to first take that responsibility on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also a lot of people are thinking in terms of, they don't want to be I don't know how to say it, but they look at things, even the small things it's not enough. It's somehow it's not enough. So for example, let me give you an example. So people are looking, some of the properties that I bought initially, I was making like 250 net cash flow per month. And I talk to investors now and they say, oh, 250, that's not worth it. What do you mean it's not worth it? This is like 15% cash on cash return. This is, but oh no, but it's only 250. But people think in terms of absolute numbers and they say, well, that's not worth it. But yeah, you have 100 of these doors, or you have like yourself, like over almost 200 doors like that at $250 a door. That's a lot of money.
You're doing all right.
So that when you think about that, is people are thinking in absolute terms, and they look at this amount of money and they say, oh, and then instead of thinking in relative term, really looking at what is your return on equity, what is your return on cash, and that's what's important.
And Eric, I think, I speaking for myself, I had a really difficult time forecasting long periods of time in the future. So for example, when I started buying investment properties with my mom, there's an 8-plex that we purchased. And it was one of our first purchases. I mean, probably the first 3 or 4 properties that we bought, we got into an 8-plex, also 100% financed because we took a loan from my grandparents. So we used OPM, other people's money. And we had $50 cash flow a door. So we had $400 cash flow on the property. And I'll be honest, it was a hell of a lot of work for $400 in cash flow, Eric. It really was. But what I found that I didn't have an ability to do at that time, and I think this is a human characteristic, is that we don't see 15 or 20 or 30 years into the future. So I bought that property when I was probably 23. I'm 43. So 20 years later, the rents for that property at the time were between $350 and $385 a door, and maybe up to $400 a door. And today, those units rent out for $1,495 a door. Yeah. So what starts as a trickle, $100 a month in cash flow, $200 a month in cash flow, if you keep the property over long periods of time, becomes an absolute river. And so when I look at it right now, with what the government is doing with all this stimulus, they are depreciating the value of the dollar. I have this great, visual that shows that, the average house in 1971 was $10,500. Now it's $400,000. So that's just an example of the dollar, depreciating. And over long periods of time, your debt stays the same on those properties unless you refinance and pull cash out, but your rents go up enormously. And it's that long-term view, or, maybe as you put it, strategy, that it's not a home run. I just have to get on first base, and time will turn this thing into a home run.
That's right. And that's kind of what I was trying to touch on as well, with that only $250 a month in cash flow, is that, you have to, it's small steps, small increment, but people want to have as we know, for everything, they want to have the one pill that's going to solve everything. I take this pill, I'm fit and I lose all my weight and all of that. It's just like, it doesn't work like that. Everything is incremental. You have to set your path, and look forward, look ahead. And I think one thing that in terms of legacy, I think this is something that's very important, and is if you want to change your perspective, a lot of people are focused on themselves and focus on retirement. And I think this is something that's very important. But if you want to change your perspective a little bit and kind of like to assure yourself that you're on the right path, is think about your grandkids. What are your grandkids going to say about you, the actions that you've taken in order to, and how is that going to help them? So imagine your grandkids now, they're living, they're part of the family, the family business, and they can go and do what they want with their lives, and enjoy life, go to college if they want to, with any college they want, they can travel, they can enjoy life. And of course, they can contribute to society, and maybe to society in a different manner, in a more significant manner. But think of it this terms. Think of it not only as a 30-year point of view, but think of it as a 100-year point of view. And I think that's what's important, because you have yourself, then I have my kids that are working in the business right now, and they're going to take it on and then just continue to grow that. And then my grandkids is going to be, when they're going to look at that, it's going to be a massive portfolio that, that's going to make sure that they have a secure lifestyle from that point on. And, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's so interesting that you say that, because, realtors call me all the time and say, hey, do you own that, that building over there, the, Village Park Villas? And yeah. Well, we've got, 3 buyers that are willing to pay cash for that building. And my response is, I don't own that property. That my kids own that property. They're 9 and 11, and they're not going to be able to sell for a long time. My job's just to manage it, and I get the grace of the cash flow between now and when I give it to them. So I have that same mentality when we're buying, even when we're buying a property. Hey, it's only $150 or $250 a month in cash flow, but imagine what it'll be when Xander and Arya get it.
Yeah. And this is where that location kind of like matters as well. You kind of hear often they say, oh, this guy's a genius. Look where he bought this property and now it's worth a fortune. Yeah, but when he bought the property, it was a dirt pit. Nobody wanted it. He bought it for like $1,000, and now it's worth $1 million. But that's because it was the right location, and he kind of have a vision for improving the use of the property and all of that. And he saw he had a better plan, and he kind of like, he knew what would happen, or he had a vision of what could happen, and maybe even made that vision happen. So I think that's, I find that interesting. And I want to be that genius that when they say, oh, wow, this is, and sometimes I do feel like that. It's just like, we kind of look and say, wow, it's just like, we really hit it. Like with Memphis, with Midtown Memphis, our investment there, it was just like, we invested there a little bit before everybody else started investing and started developing. And now we're looking at ourselves like, wow, we really saw this coming.
I'll tell you, time is a lot smarter than Josh. That's for sure. And every bad real estate decision I've made and really beat myself up in the moment, I just said, okay, is it positive cash flow? Yes. Great. Put it in the pool. Let's roll. And 20 years later, I'm a genius. It's amazing how that works. So we've talked a lot about, I think, psychology and how we think about real estate and how we prioritize and time. And I think there was a lot of nuggets here. If it's okay with you, I'd like to pivot just a little bit and get tactical, because I know there are some people listening to this that are like, that all sounds great, but it's out of reach. It's grandiose. And how do I tactically get started? So what I'd like to, spend the rest of our time, or a good portion of this time together with, is, if you were starting over, and let's say you had you had a job that had a decent income, but you weren't, as you were describing about your parents, they weren't knocking it out of the park, but maybe they had enough to cultivate a little bit of savings. Walk me through, what's the plan? How would you recommend this for your children? How do people get started? How do they get on base?
Yep. And I think, so if you have a full-time job, I think that what is important is kind of like look at your expenses. I think setting a goal, I think this is very important, and a goal that you can kind of track your progress on. So I would look at, first thing is kind of like expenses. What are the monthly living expenses? How much do you need in order to live? And then, so that's kind of your baseline. You can kind of like, if you were working, like if you were not working at all, you were not working full time, you were financially free. Is that how much you would spend a month? You can kind of start looking at that. Would you spend more? Would you spend less? And maybe there's some stuff that you wouldn't need, but set that as kind of like your target for a monthly income. And then figure out kind of like, what are some of the investment strategies that you can use to kind of like start to eat up at that, start to step one step at a time towards that goal. And so that's kind of like setting that goal. I think this is very important. Something that's trackable, something that's achievable, something that you can feel the difference every day, and also that you're going to be you're going to know that when you do something that you're going to be off track. So something that helps you focus on that goal. So if you buy that brand new car and you see the payment increasing your living expenses by $300 a month, you're moving away from your goal, right? So that's the kind of goal you want to set. And then you look at your resources. How much time do I have to devote to this? How much money can I gather up? There's money is not only in your bank account. Money can also be in equity in a house that you have or something like that. It could also be in toys that you don't need anymore, like a sailboat or something like that. And then it could also be in your retirement account, in your 401k or something like that. So look at all that. They could also be other people's money, which is kind of like a little bit outside. But think about access to that money as well, as kind of like how would you be able to bring that money in? If you know people that have hundreds of thousands of dollars, how can you bring that in and talk to them and bring them in a deal? Maybe there's something that can be done there. Once you know that, I mean, the biggest constraint is often time and money. These are the two really that are important. Then you start finding a strategy that works with that. In my book, Stop Trading Your Time for Money, I have strategy quadrant, where basically I map out all the different passive income strategies, and then how much time is required for implementing this strategy from scratch, and also how risky they are. If you don't have too much money, you would kind of tend to private money lending, maybe, or turnkey rentals, and so these are the kind of like where you would be. So this is the lower left-hand quadrant, and so they're fairly risky. You don't have to have that much money involved, and you don't need much time. So everything that's turnkey, that's not it would be a good thing. And as you build your passive income portfolio, if you look in the future, just to get you motivated, as you look towards that, when you get to about 80% of your passive income goal, your monthly passive income goal, then you can start looking at it and say, like, do I want to make the jump? Do I want to, because there are obviously other strategies in the quadrant that are going to provide better returns and all of that. If you just look at Burr's strategy, for example, then you might say, okay, well, I want to do that, but I need more time for that. So this is when, if this is something that interests you, then you may want to consider then taking some time off, like 6 months off your job or 3 months or something like that. You have more flexibility now that you have 80% of your goal coming in as passive income. And this is kind of, but the process is small steps. And, so this is why people are, you need to be disciplined. You need to be doing it every day, and you need to stay focused in order to get there.
Well, and I think, I had a group of teammates on a webinar this week, and we were talking about, how do you get in the game? How do we start? We're not, high six-figure income earners. We're getting by, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of capacity there. And one of the strategies we talked about was just like you talked about, look at how much income you have, start figuring out, how can I live slightly below my means? How do I start saving? You mentioned retirement funds. You mentioned depreciating assets. For anybody doesn't know what a depreciating asset is, that's an asset that is worth less over time, i.e. a car, i.e. your four-wheeler, right? They're going to be worth less in 10 years than they are today, where a house in most instances is going to be worth more. So that's an appreciating asset. And what we want to try to do is we want to try to live below our means. We want to try to get rid of or shed some of the depreciating assets. We want to get a little bit of capital, and then we want to start controlling appreciating assets. One of the best strategies I know for that is be a first-time home buyer. I mean, there's 100% grant programs out there. There are 3% down programs. And this home doesn't have to be the forever home. It can just be the starting place. It's just the step on the grand staircase of where you want to go. But once you get on that step, you put a little love into that condo or that first house, you put, you paint it and you update it, you let a little time go, a little bit of appreciation. All of a sudden that home can be rented out, and that home can create a cash flow, and you can parlay into the next property. But the point is figuring out, A, it's my responsibility. B, I have to figure out my expenses and I have to start living below my means. And C, I got to get in the game. I got to take a risk. I have to take the first step, even though I want to be at the top of that staircase. But the first step is just enough to get into the game. And that's where I feel people, I'm just talking in regards to this group I was having a webinar with this week. There was fear and trepidation about getting to that first step. And then there was also a feeling, like you said, that it wasn't a home run play, that they felt like,
exactly,
I want to get there, but they didn't see that there was 27 steps or 127 steps between them and where they want to get.
Yeah. It's kind of like watching a baseball game in slow motion. So it's kind of like, you see them run to the first base and it's just like, and that's kind of what it's like, but it's also going to accelerate over time. So you get the first one, you get two, you get four, and then, they start being appreciating. Then you can kind of like double down. If you're working full time, you can double down and pay your first mortgage. It's going to increase your cash flow and all of that. And there's techniques also for accelerating that cash flow and accelerating, regaining access to your equity. So yeah,
I love it. Well, I want to make sure we end with talking about your book, Stop Trading Your Time for Money. But if I had a couple more questions, the first one I would have for you is, how do you recommend, or are there any tips or advice you would give around how somebody finds their first home, whether it be a primary residence or an investment property? Any tips on that in today's crazy real estate market?
Well, so I think when we looked for markets where to invest and stuff like that, we looked for states that were landlord friendly. We looked for metropolitan areas that had a sustainable growth in population and in business. We didn't want to have something that was exuberant growth and that because that would mean that the prices would be too high and all that kind of stuff, and there would not be enough supply for the properties that we're looking for. We were also looking for business diversification. We were looking for house affordability, a certain range. We were looking at all these things, and also we would look at the median house value versus the median average earnings. And then we kind of like the rental earnings. And then we kind of try to figure out, are we close to that 1% rule in that particular metropolitan area? And so that kind of narrowed down significantly the number of markets that we had to look at.
Could you break down that 1% rule for us just really quickly?
Yeah, so the 1% rule is basically, it's a quick rule of thumb to basically give you an idea if that property is actually within range. Is it going to cash flow? And you basically are taking, the rent per month, and you're dividing it by the value of the property. So if the value of the property is $100,000, you need about $1,000 in gross rent to get to the 1% rule. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cash flow, but at least it's worth, when you're looking at 4 binders of MLS listings, it's pretty quick to go and say, okay, well, this one's not going to work, this one's not going to work, this one's not going to work, and then you kind of like the ones that are close to it, then you can kind of like delve more into the details.
Yeah. And, part of this webinar we had this week with the teammates I was referring to, some of the folks are in California, and they have just seen the most epic run of real estate appreciation, and rents have not kept up. That's and right. I have a really, more trepidation, let's just say, about, really strongly encouraging people to buy in those markets, where in markets like Utah, of course, Georgia, some areas of Florida and Texas, you can still get, really good ratio between purchase price and rents. and be in a positive cash flow situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I live in California, and I mean, when I moved here in 2000, I wanted to. I had a lot of money to invest at that point, and I couldn't find anything here that cash flowed at a reasonable return. Again, people need to focus on the return, right? So I know some friends that invest here in California, and they say, "Oh yeah, this is great. I make like $1,000 in net cash flow a month." Yes, but you also have $500,000 in equity in this thing. So this is like, how do you calculate? But I make $1,000 a month. This is great. Oh my God. So, but this is kind of like the situation that we're in. People are not thinking in relative terms, and so that's what is really important, because with that $500,000, I mean, they would be making closer to $20,000 a month in net cash flow. So that's significant.
It's a significant difference. Yep. Okay, so Eric, let's talk about myths in finance. Are there any myths that you see out there in finance that are generally accepted that you just absolutely do not believe in and you'd like to challenge?
Well, I think people should realize that financial advisors are salespeople. I don't know why they're called financial advisors. They're not financial advisors. They do have some financial knowledge, but their scope is limited. I wish there was a little bit more transparencies about their role. And they're basically trained into some very specific financial products, not financial advisors that are looking at it holistically. The other thing too is that if this is what you're looking for, if you're looking for somebody that's going to help you with your stock market, with your real estate, with your taxes and stuff like that, you're not going to find it. That person is you. You have to build a team with, yes, a financial advisor. Yes, you need to have one for your stock market and all that kind of stuff, and kind of like making sure that this is balanced a certain way. You need to find somebody that's going to help you with your taxes. You need to have somebody else that's going to help you with your real estate as well. So all those things, you need to be at the center of that, take the information, and then make the decision. This is what people think, that is that one guy that they're going to talk to, and that's going to have all the answer. Maybe if you have a mentor, that could be helpful to kind of guide you in the right direction. But in general, even though, I know you probably deal with lawyers and accountants all the time. And it's very interesting, because the lawyer is going to tell you, you should create your company in Wyoming, blah, 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 or whatever. And then your CPA say, oh, no, you should be creating it here or there. And, but you have to make the decision. They both have a very valid point of view from their perspective, like what you should be doing for taxes, what you should be doing for legal concerns. And then you have to make the decision in the end. And that's what's important about building the team that's going to provide you the information, but realize you're the one.
It goes back to what you really pointed out earlier, Eric, which is self-reliance. At the end of the day, the buck stops with you, and you've got to own that, and you've got to manage that team. There isn't somebody you could offload that to and likely be successful.
Yeah, exactly. So drop the hammer, put the hammer down, and then delegate that part of it, that part of your business. But there's one thing that only you can do, is to kind of build this other team and lead this other team.
I love that. That's a great myth to dispel. Okay, so let's with our final. I know it's a good interview when we've got to the end of our time, and I still want to drill you with a handful more questions. But with respect to time, my last question for you, Eric, is what your favorite personal finance or investment book is, and of course, I assume it's going to be Stop Trading Your Time for Money, but we'll talk about that next. Besides for that book, what one has impacted you the most, and do you recommend people read?
I think if specific to real estate, I would say Loopholes of Real Estate. I think it's a very good book. I think it's part of the Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of like collection of books. So this was very good because it's going to answer a lot of questions about, oh, how should I structure my deals? So should I have should I have an LLC or S corp or whatever? How many should I have? How much? Blah blah blah. And it really goes and explain a lot of different things, a lot of different topics, and so that I think this is a great kind of like manual to go to and get started.
I love that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the other one too is a little bit less known, and this is why I like to mention it. It's called The Wealthy Code by George Antoine, and it's really is interesting because it's really focusing on the numbers and kind of like looking at, okay, well, you're investing in this particular vehicle, and then what is impacting your the returns that you're getting. So if you're investing in 401k, for example, then, oh, well, you have fees, you have this, you have that. When you exit out of your 401k, you have more fees, you pay taxes and stuff like that. And this is kind of like what you end up with. He talks also about inflation. He talks about, all kinds of different, there's basically like 4 different aspects that he's looking at. And he really highlights very well kind of like why it's important and what kind of returns you need to get and why you need to focus on the return on your equity and your return on your cash. That's what you need to focus on in order to be successful. Otherwise, you're going to fall behind because of taxes, because of inflation, because of this and stuff. So, yeah.
That sounds like a really good book. I'm going to pick that one up. That one's called The Wealthy Code.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Thank you. Great recommendations. All right, Eric. So tell us a little bit about your book and why should somebody pick it up? What are they going to learn in Stop Trading Your Time for Money?
Yeah. So my goal in that book is really to break down the barriers that are standing between, your listeners and their goals. So this is what was important. And when I looked at it, I looked at my personal journey and through real estate, and I kept thinking why was I able to achieve it and so many people are they're stuck. I was lucky in many ways, and I didn't have I didn't really have a very difficult life, but I did have some challenges and things that in the book, I talk about the things that really helped me kind of like overcome these things. Part of it is the mindset. I mean, my parents, and they were really a big influence on kind of like my initial mindset. And then when I went to school, the education system really freed me from most of these limiting beliefs. I still had to kind of work on some other ones, but that was very enlightening to me. And I'm not even thinking about university. I'm thinking about elementary school and high school. Mm-hmm. These were the things that really freed my mind for a lot of things, that to know that what was possible. And so the mindset, limiting beliefs. So I give some tools. Everything is related to tools and kind of like a journal for you to break down these barriers.
I love that.
Then we talk about strategies, like more tactically about the strategies. I talk about the strategy quadrant. I talk about the strategy alignment triangle, how you align your goals with the investment strategies, and kind of like the supporting aspect of it, like your time, your resources, and your market, and then kind of like figuring that out. So that's the other component. And then the other skills around kind of how do you measure performance, kind of like the basics of that they don't necessarily teach you at school, but the basics of how do you know that this is a good deal versus a bad deal, how do you mitigate risk, how to get over the hump, and really take you to the journey of going through a transaction.
Love that.
Right. So you go and do this, and this is what's going to happen. And you're going to be scared. You're going to have that, and say, well, go back to this and say, okay, look at the risk instead of having them float around. List them down and say, okay, well, and have a mitigation plan for each of these risks to put your mind at ease. And that's going to help you sign on the dotted line and then move forward. And it gets easier after that.
Man, I love it. I love it. That sounds like an incredible book for somebody who's looking to get started and trying to see, a whole game plan and strategy. So Eric, thank you so much for joining us and sharing so generously with your time. You've dropped a lot of knowledge. I know that this is going to be a very popular podcast, and I hope to have you on in a future episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for listening to the Infinite Financial Freedom Podcast. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcast and Spotify to be notified of all future episodes, and follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Neo Home Loans and how we empower homebuyers with financial literacy and guide you on your journey to financial freedom, visit neohomeloans.com.